I'd inherited a culture within my organization where it was like security first, security first, security first in Adobe, right? And if you can't do anything unless security blesses it. Well, the problem is that just means that everybody's running away from us and doing shit behind our back. So I was changing culture, and I worked with a brand leader, believe it or not, brought her in, Victoria, and she came in, and we're just talking about brand. Like, what do we want to be known for as a team and an organization? We want to be partners. We want to be creative. We want to be business first and risk reducing second.
Welcome to a new episode of All Aboard, the show where we have real conversations with IT and security practitioners. No fluff, no talking points, just straight talk from experts and advice for tackling the toughest problems facing cloud-forward companies today. I'm your host, Alex Bovee, CEO and co-founder of Conductor One. For this week's episode of the All Aboard podcast, I'm excited to be joined by Den Jones. Den is the Chief Security Officer at Banyan Security, an SSE solution that protects access to websites, SaaS apps, and infrastructure. Den is a veteran in the security space. In addition to his current role as CISO at Banyan, he previously led IT and security teams at Adobe and Cisco. In this episode, Den talks about why Zero Trust is only one piece of a larger security puzzle. He also dives into why the so-called security-first mindset needs to change and the pivotal role that security leaders should play in building company culture. I can't wait for you to hear our conversation, so let's jump right in. Den, welcome. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy, I've known you for a while. I've always really enjoyed our conversations and just shooting it on all things security. So excited to dive in and talk a little bit more. I was thinking maybe before we do that, could you give the listeners an intro to yourself? Who are you? What do you do? What have you done in the past?
Yeah, awesome, Alex. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. As always, great to catch up. So Den Jones, I am the Chief Security Officer at Banyan Security, a small startup, which I became familiar with in 2019 while I was in my previous role at Adobe, where I ran enterprise security. And we had our Zero Trust initiative there, which we deployed in 2018, wanted to do a cloud-first approach to the architecture, so we found Banyan in 2019. Roll on, though, actually, in 2020, I joined Cisco and I ran enterprise security there for about a year and a half. At which time the team at Banyan knocked on the door and they asked if I wanted to join the team. So, yes, I've been with Banyan just over a year and a half now. And my role is it's a little blended, right? I mean, I run security, I run IT, run our customer zero program where we eat our own. Oh, wait, is it dog food or you drink some champagne? I don't know. God, who gives a shit? So that stuff. And then on top of that, I do a lot of evangelism, conferences, a podcast, stuff like this. And then speaking with other execs about strategy and security. And, Zero Trust is one piece of the puzzle. My teams at Adobe and Cisco, I had about 9 different teams in both organizations. And ZT was just one piece of one team's puzzle, not even the only piece of their puzzle. But when you deploy to like 110,000 people, this thing that everyone thinks is a magical being that you can't get done, then yeah, I like to debunk that myth that it's accessible and it's a good part of your security strategy.
I love it. So you are a rare breed, my friend, because I feel like you've had an illustrious career as a CISO in the seat operationally, owning security, owning projects. You've been on more of the evangelism side now. You've kind of seen a broad swath of things. So I just think that's really interesting. That's pretty awesome. But to maybe to dig in a little bit on the Adobe experience, that was when we first met, when I was running authentication and a bunch of auth products when I was at Okta, and we got a chance to chat. And you were evangelizing and rolling out this project Zen, which what I think is really interesting is I was in early adoption and you were an early evangelist of Zero Trust. You were like a Zero Trust person before Zero Trust was cool. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, can you share what was Project Zen? Why was it important? What were you guys doing? Just maybe some detail there.
It's funny, right? Yeah, we had deployed Okta and we got to a position. Our first deployment with Okta was 300 applications in 6 weeks. We then built the self-service capability using APIs, And before long, we've got like 2,000 applications registered using Okta within the internal workings of Adobe, right? And the reality was we got that to a place where, people complain when you first deploy new technology, right? So we got this to a position where there was no complaints. The thing was, it was always stable. It was always a great platform. And I've been a big fan of Okta and what Todd and the team have been doing there for a long time. But the one thing that was missing, and we had done an employee survey within Adobe employees from the HR, and what they were discovering was, there's a tie between your employee happiness and your company profitability. So the happier your employees are, your company will be more profitable. And not a lot of people know that. There's studies done on it. I'm not the expert, but I was told, hey, Dan, in the top 10 things that people don't like about coming to work, one of them is logging in many times. One of them is changing their passwords every 90 days. And the other one's VPN. And I was like, well, it just so happens we'd had this kind of skunkworks project that a guy called Benzie John was working on in my team. He was one of my lead architects. And it was all kind of a play on Google's Beyond Corp. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to make the internal applications cloud-like. We wanted to make the experience of accessing applications more seamless so you don't need VPN. And we wanted to get rid of passwords and use certificates and then do some security intelligence in the background so we had a better understanding when an account was compromised. So we went down this path and Zen was going to deliver. It's funny, the team came up with about 20 things that Zen was going to deliver, right? And I'm going to do these executive presentations and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to talk about 20. Let me give 3 big game-changing security things and 3 big things for IT, that's user experience and operational cost savings. And we just went in there with that. And I was like, look, we're going to improve the authentication security. We're going to remove the VPN so that bad actors, if they've compromised your device, can't just crawl through your network. We're going to make it application layer only. And we're going to do better security on these applications because we're going to do device trust and device registration. As you know with Okta, Alex, right? Anybody can log in from anywhere in the world because it's a cloud directory. So we wanted to get to a position where you can't do that because we were seeing it happen. We were seeing bad actors where that password has been maybe reused in other places and is compromised. And the user, the bright user at the end of the bloody telephone is hitting the Okta Verify button regardless, right? So we were trying to thwart that. From a user experience perspective, way back in the early 2000s, our CIO even then wanted to do more cloud first. So all new apps and services we were building, they were cloud first if they could be, right? So what ends up happening is we've got more users who are working from home and mobile and all that stuff. And then we've got apps that they're accessing are more cloud, less of them were internal. The net result of that is that users are rarely accessing internal applications because there's fewer of those, but they're now confused as shit because they don't know when to VPN in versus when not. So we're just like, well, can we make it so that they don't care? The other thing that this enables is the ability to turn your office networks into guest networks because all you need is internet access, the ability to do an M&A without joining networks because that company just needs to get to the internet and then they can access all the Adobe apps and services. And we done 2 M&As with this and it worked a treat. So stuff like that. And we delivered Zen from ideation to delivery in 7 months without having we had no blueprint really because Beyond Corp was just too elaborate and too expensive for us, right? And then, we partnered with Okta, we partnered with VMware, we partnered with F5, and between the 3 companies, I even remember Okta and VMware announced a partnership based on the work that we done. I was even on the bloody video for the announcement, right? So it was really cool, but the problem with that architecture is if you were in Starbucks and as a user going to a cloud app like Salesforce.com, our architecture still required you come in via this VMware infrastructure. And I wanted the team to find a cloud-based solution. so that you only come in the network if you have to come into an internal app. And that's when in 2019, our second version of this was with Banyan.
Gotcha. It's super fascinating. So there was a lot to unpack in what you were saying there, but one thing that jumped out to me was clearly there's like some top level goals. There's employee happiness because that ties to a revenue line. There's obviously like the security outcome. There's the architectural aspirational aspect of it from like a Beyond Corp perspective. And then there's bundling all that up and figuring out how you, I don't mean this as a pejorative, but effectively, how do you sell it internally? Like, how do you get like buy-in across the leadership team to actually go implement this big initiative? How did you think about across those top level objectives? Like, we have an architectural objective, we have a security objective, we have a revenue objective. How did you prioritize, hey, network is what we want to focus on first versus authentic? There's a bunch of places you can't focus from a security perspective. You guys obviously picked one of these big ones. How did you rationalize that?
So the couple of things for me was, whenever you go to an executive team to sell your magical vision, right? Excuse me, you need to go in a way that says, I'm going to deliver some goodness and improvement for the maxis, and I'm going to do it in such a way that I'm not going to ask for more money. And actually, I'm going to do it in such a way that it'll save the company money overall, and it will improve the experience, and it will improve security. Now, very rarely in your career do you ever get to say, I'm going to improve security and improve the experience. Normally, you improve security at the cost of more friction for your employees. So here's this fancy new unicorn project coming along that enabled us to do both. And then when you're selling it to the executives, you're basically saying, hey, I'm going to do it within my cost constraints already. And literally, our first run, we spent $248,000, and I increased my staff by one. That $248,000, I saved some other costs elsewhere and just moved the spend around, so my target didn't adjust. And that got us the first deployment, and that was literally 40,000 people. When it got to year two, our first deployment, posture checking wasn't great. It really required the MDM to be there. So an M&A use case or a vendor or BYOD use case, they weren't as easy. So when we were looking at like, what do we do next? And the next iteration of this, the money we spent for Banyan was obviously more. But what we got to say was, we've built the credibility within the organization of what we've just done. We know what we're doing. We can do it. Executives that don't have any credibility don't get shit done, and they don't get given the money, because nobody wants to throw money away on a strategy that is never realized, right? So really, there was a lot of that. We didn't sell it to the 40,000 people because you know this, Alex, right? I never had to communicate to someone and say, would you like to log in less?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, right? I'm going to communicate, you have nothing to do. There's really nothing to see here. So literally, our communication was a blog post literally on our intranet that was available for everybody. And we kind of publicized it a little bit to say, hey, VPNs are going away and passwords are going away. And, we're doing this thing called Zen. But nobody reads that shit anyway, right? So the funny thing, we had an engineer, he opened a security incident with our SOC, and he basically said he's found a vulnerability in our VPN or whatever, right? Our infrastructure, because he could get to internal apps without VPNing in. So he thinks he's found this magical problem, right? So we all jump in. There's an incident created. We do a research, and we just find out that this guy is actually using our Zen stuff.
Love it.
He doesn't know, And by the way, our first POC really that we went, with employees, friends and families and stuff, we enabled this environment. We didn't communicate to anybody except 50 people. We told 50 people, hey, go try this out. We looked at the logs on the Monday. We had over 3,000 people inadvertently using this platform. Because we'd enabled it, we had it set up, and if they're on the their home network and they're just trying to get to the intranet, which was one of the apps, they they would normally try it the weekend or the wiki or something, and then they would fail, and because they're at home, then they'd go, "Oh shit, I need to VPN in." Well, because we had built this, they were doing it the weekend. It didn't fail. It got in, and they didn't even know.
That's such a great story. I love the security that's so transparent. It just works, and people don't even understand that it's like it's like not a bug,
Yeah.
actually a feature.
Yeah, and we had. It's funny because the reverse proxies. I mean, when you think of this from an architectural perspective, you still have reverse proxies that enable the connectivity to go from the outside to the inside. So those are banks of clusters, clustered virtual appliances. Now, when we were putting these in place, we still had on top of it other layers of security that was on these appliances that we didn't have with our normal VPN stuff. So I don't want to reveal what it all is, but there was extra checks and balances, extra security, application level security, but because in a VPN, you don't get that.
Yeah.
It's just a network tunnel. So we are not allowing network level access. It's only application. So you can't do an Nmap and run around our network. You can only access that one app. And it's also tied to your Okta users and groups.
Right.
So you don't need to do these IP tables and all that nonsense. So you're also reducing the cost there with things like that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, whenever you're at the device and the identity layer, you can just add a lot more logic and a lot more sophistication versus like I'm trying to inspect bits and bytes and I don't really have a context around it.
Yeah, packet inspection for me is just bullshit because, at the end of the day, what really happens is you start to slow down the traffic. And there are vendors out there that want to funnel the traffic because that's their origin.
Mm-hmm.
It was never, packet inspection was never a big thing for us, right? And we just wanted to do an extra layer of security. I mean, I'm just trying to make it easier for people and give an extra layer of security so it's a little bit more secure. And that investment you make in stuff like packet inspection for me is a huge investment. And it's also a bigger risk to your business because you are funneling traffic through an infrastructure which is adding fragility.
Right.
Right. We didn't do that. We integrated with Okta so that during the login workflow, that SAML assertion, we're redirecting that traffic to do our posture checks and our stuff. And then if you're going to an app that's internal, we're now directing you via our secure gateway.
Yep.
And if you're external, you're just on your way,
Shifting gears there for just a second, because we've talked a lot about the technology aspect of it, but as a CISO, I imagine culture is a huge part of how you get, improved security outcomes for your business as well. I'm kind of curious how you thought about culture as it relates to, you were a CISO at Adobe, you were a CISO at Cisco, some of the biggest technology companies out there. How your people use that technology and how your people behave has a big impact. Did you focus much on that? How did you think about it?
So there's two things. And I didn't have the official CISO title at Adobe or Cisco, but my role of enterprise security was very similar to that of an IT security leader. So I'd report to the C-level person. So just so I'm not overinflating my ego, But culture's a great one because there's two different things, right? There's the culture within the security organization. I inherited a culture within my organization where it was like security first, security first, security first in Adobe, right? And if you can't do anything unless security blesses it. Well, the problem is that just means that everybody's running away from us and doing shit behind our back. So I was changing culture, and I worked with a brand leader, believe it or not, brought her in, Victoria. She came in and we're just talking about brand. Like, what do we want to be known for as a team in an organization? We want to be partners. We want to be creative. We want to be business first and risk reducing second. I mean, so when you're thinking about it, you could reduce all the risk, but you can cripple the business.
Yeah.
You can deliver the best solution, but it's overpriced and you're priced out the market or you spent all your money. So the reality is we're still running a business, and your job as an executive is to run the business in the best way while reducing risk. But it's not reducing risk while you run a business. It's the business first. So making the team feel that was important. I think it's a case of educating the organization and those around you that, be collaborative with us. If processes don't work for you, if you think something's bullshit, bureaucratic, let us know. Engage with us, because if you do that, we then can look at it and work with you and try and figure out a way to make it better. At the end of the day, a lot of security teams and executives deploy policies that are so cumbersome, they really spoil the business. So I had a conversation with a friend just the other day, and it's like, if you're in a position where everyone's circumventing your process and your approvals and everything else, then the real question is why are they doing that? And can we improve the process? Is it the process is bureaucratic and is antiquated for your business? Because a lot of them are. We inherit a lot of shit when we walk into these jobs. And a lot of these things have been there forever, right?
Yeah, 100%. One thing, so it is a total truism, and we've seen it time and time again, that people will work around bad technology and process. They just want to get their job done. And I think that shift in security mentality of being the team of no to how do you work cross-functionally to help enable teams and business partners to go faster and actually achieve their objectives seems like it's like a fundamental mindset shift from I used to own the firewall and I'm allowing things and disallowing things too. You really got to change that focus big time. It's funny, actually, Paul, my co-founder, has a really good story about how this happened at Rackspace after they had a breach where the team responded by basically putting all the security technology in place that broke everything and nothing worked, and it was frustrating to get the work done. which was the spirit of him starting one of his first companies. But
I was going to say, well, that's after Adobe's very public breach in 2013. I mean, the whole shift was security first, security first, security first. What a pain in the ass.
Yeah, this brutal outcomes. I mean, shifting, clicking into that a little bit more, maybe. I think this is an interesting topic. I think a lot about this in terms of our product and category that we're in, ease of use, obviously making sure that you're delivering both the security and the productivity outcomes, because I don't think it has to be a trade-off, and I think the best products will realize that. You worked with a lot of vendors, you worked with a lot of products. I kind of want to get the juice from you a little bit, maybe without naming names, but what's maybe one of the best experiences you've had with a security product or vendor, and one of the worst? And I'm asking this question because I think it's very enlightening for the listeners to understand, kind of from a practitioner perspective, what creates that good experience or that bad experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, it's not a technology. The first thing is the engagement with the company and especially the sales organizations. I tell people I have this disdain for salespeople, and after 30 years in the game, I can probably count on 5 fingers the number of salespeople that if they called me today, I would pick up the phone and I'd help them out. Like, after 30 years. And that's because they're so busy on the sale. They're not realizing this is a relationship you're building. And I've worked with vendors, and I've worked with some great salespeople and great vendors where after 10 years, I would still buy from them. I still think they're relevant and they still listen. So I think there's the people aspect of it. It's a relationship game. But the next aspect of it is from a technology perspective, like you mentioned, is user experience is key. And it's not user experience for the 10 admins in your team. Who gives a shit about them? If your product is going to be in front of 40,000 people, it's that. Then the other thing is the cost of operation. People need to stop building products that are point and click, right? Point and click is cool, and that's good. In some cases, it always needs to be there. But the reality is API first, make it possible that in the background I can integrate it into my other tools in my stack, and stop thinking that I'm going to replace all my shit and buy your one big platform, right? That's not ever happening too. So a couple of vendors I've worked with over the years, I've had my team build front ends so that I could then make for 40 or 100,000 people things self-service, because self-service without calling IT is a wonderful thing. Even my team at Adobe, our platform, we kind of originally was called eManager, but then it changed over the years. Ultimately, the end result was it was an API first platform that integrated at the back end with AD, CyberArk, Okta, SailPoint, like all of the stuff we had in the back end, this thing would integrate with, so that the front end, the users could see some basic stuff and do some basic stuff, right? Because a company like Adobe, you're not just using Okta. You might have Azure, AD, Okta, a bundle of other directories. So just thinking I'm going to use the Okta interface just to change my password, it's not enough, right?
Yeah.
And I don't expect Okta to solve that problem. So sometimes, like, the accessibility of the platform via API and those kind of mechanisms is way more important, because that enables us to do things for 40,000 people.
Right.
So stuff like that, Alex, I get very passionate about some of this shit, man. I need to calm down sometimes.
No, I love it. I mean, I think, we see it too, obviously, the extensibility points and where you can extend your platform and integrate it into because particularly for large enterprises, it's absolutely critical. The other piece that you said that, it hits so close to my heart is like your relationship with a company really truly starts from that very first touch of like the sales, the discovery call, when you're having a conversation with them. It's how you're responsive. It's how you're treating them. Do you really understand their problems? Like, are you digging into it versus treating it like a transaction and running away? I just think that's so critical to the overall experience of a customer, like how easy you are to do business with. Are you a pain in the butt? Are you easy? It really does start up front. I think a lot of companies don't think about that customer life cycle truly that way. They use sales as like a different org.
Yeah, it really is a situation whereby you're thinking about the relationship, because we don't also stay in the same companies as well, right? We move around other companies, whether you're a salesperson or a founder or like an exec or whatever, you're still moving around, and my architects move around. So, you want to establish those relationships, because if you've got a great credibility and trust with someone and they change jobs or you change jobs, that enables you to be successful in your next role as well, right? So it's a long-term plan. Too many people think about this short-term plan of, I just want, especially people who are, selling to customers, and I see that more now that I've joined Banyan, right? I'm on this side of the fence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, like it's all about sale, customer happiness. The heart's in the right place, and I get it. But, for me, I'm like, oh my God, man, I want you not to lose your shit when you realize we're just trying to establish a relationship that might be many years.
Right. Yep. 100%. So I'd be remiss if I didn't switch gears and ask a little bit about AI and ML. I think it's the hot topic today. You see, there's a lot of FUD out there. There's a lot of uncertainty and speculation about all the impacts of this. And I think I've been thinking a lot about it in the context of how does it improve the technology we're building. I think there's another aspect of it of how does it create compliance risk, or how does it enable attack? How does it cause problems either through compliance or data privacy, or even maybe becoming a critical part of like an attacker's tool chain? I'm sort of curious to get your predictions or thoughts here around AI and ML and how it's going to impact.
Well, it's funny. My security intern and one of our engineers finishing off a kind of blog post on this topic, which is really from an attack and from a defense perspective, what's the growth patterns been like? What are the tools like? Every month it just seems like this shit's on the rise, and truly it is. And I think there's a couple of angles, right? One is, as an attacker goes, and especially if phishing and social engineering is 80% of the attacks, right? Then can you imagine today, I think the stats are along the lines of, there's a 1% success rate, and they send out 1 million emails, one email to 1 million people. And they click it or they don't click, get a discount on your mortgage or some bullshit, right? But in the future, they're going to use AI and ML to get really detailed, and there'll be 1 million emails to 1 million people with more than a 1% success rate. We're going to be like 60 to 80% success rate, because they'll be like, hey, Alex, Dan said I should drop you a line. I heard you were talking about blah, blah, blah in your podcast, and we got these 3 things that we think you might be interested to learn. Here's a PDF, or here's a link. because they're going to be scraping all this nice stuff that we're talking about today, and they're going to leverage that against us or against other people. So it's going to be more targeted. And as a defender goes, then obviously there's more and more tools out there. Oh, and from an attacker perspective, just even the ability to build and mutate malware is going to be far simpler with less skill required.
Yep.
And then from a defender perspective, hopefully there's more and more of the tools available to us as well, but then there's more and more products. One of the little twisty things, that we're chasing in Banyan is the ability to decide whether you want your employees to access these sites or different sites. So we can block it or make you aware, or we can put other controls in place. But the reality is most enterprises are still struggling to decide what and how they're going to do about AI. So I saw a great article from the team at Adobe, right? And I shared that on LinkedIn because for me it was fascinating where you get to a position where it's like we're gonna educate the employees, we're gonna empower the employees, but we're gonna make sure that they've got enough education to know what the right thing to do is, right?
Yeah.
And then do you put safeguards in place? I think more enterprises are going to be looking for products in the future that allow them to put safeguards in place when it comes to the workforce accessing this kind of technology. Because they don't want their PII being pushed up into ChatGPT, and before long there's no way to get rid of it and it's up there for good.
Yeah. The bit about the efficacy of attackers really hits home with me. I feel like I think too often we think about security as like this binary kind of outcome driven view, and the reality is, and a lot of times it's a numbers game. At least that's been my experience, is that these are all just about sent, like you said, sending out 1 million emails with a 1% click rate, and then 1% of those people do the next action you need someone to do. And it feels like relatively easily this can become a part of the tool chain that just increases those rate, like increases percentages, doubles percentages, makes it that much better. And that's a material impact on businesses.
Yeah.
So
and the thing for us is, for many years we've had this in our toolkit for what we sell. And it's like the integration with things like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or Defender, so that if it sees malware in your device, we'll cut that session. We got other shit where we're like doing DNS and URL filtering, so that if you go and click it, we're using threat feeds and we'll block you from even going there. And we're not the only company that does shit like this. The technology exists. So for me, it's like, if you really believe that that's your concern, and it should be, because it's 80% of the attacks.
Yeah.
It's like, well, go spend some money on some crappy little company like us, and you'll get some good tech in there and we'll stop it. But I read every week about these breaches, and when you double click on the breach, you're like, oh my God, that could have been stopped.
Yeah. You're like, I know how you fix that.
Yeah, I know how you fix that.
Den,
fixed that years ago.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting close to time, but before we take off, I'd love to just get your hot predictions, any spicy predictions for 23-24 as it relates to security.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with the whole AI business. I mean, the reality is that's going to become bigger and bolder. You're gonna see. I think those, from a social engineering perspective, I think ransomware is not going to be in the news as much in the next 12 months as it's been in the last 12. And I think it's not because it's going to die down. I think it's just because people are going to focus more on the AI side of the attacks. They're going to talk more about that stuff, because I think that being such a hot topic. And in DEF CON, it was very evident. The line to get into the AI village seemed like it was longer than all the lines at Disneyland combined.
Longer than the line to check into the MGM Grand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so the next year, I think just the whole AI stuff and ML and language models and stuff, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're going to hear a lot more about it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting when, I'd hate to say it, but when these tools start getting more integrally kind of included into like the script kiddie toolkits and things like that make it really easy that people are already using to automate a lot of these attacks. It's going to be really interesting to see how that affects things.
Well, we're already seeing the way now, right? So the reality is it's going to become the most common thing in the future because it's so easy for people to launch attacks using this technology.
Yep. Really interesting stuff. Dan, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. Had a really good chat. Great learning about all things zero trust, your thoughts on culture, running big security orgs, and then what it takes to have a great relationship with a security vendor. Really interesting stuff. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Alex. Hey, thanks very much for having me. Hope to catch up soon in person next time.
Yeah, definitely, man. I'll see you.
Cheers, man. Take it easy. See ya. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode of All Aboard is brought to you by the team at Conductor One. We'd love to hear your feedback. Send us a message at allaboard@conductorone.com. Till next time.